I want to begin by saying I hope everyone who is listening to us on our relatively new affiliate, WZPR 92.3 FM, the home of Salem Radio on the Outer Banks, is keeping their heads up and on a swivel. You're going to have a 4-foot surge, it looks like, a lot of high winds, tropical storm alert. Some people have been evacuated from some of the Outer Bank islands, but it is going to stay Hurricane Aaron pretty far off of the shore. But we are thinking about that. And I'm going to talk with Governor Glenn Youngkin a little bit later this hour as he prepares for tropical storm conditions down in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area and Hampton Roads. We'll get the latest from the governor of Virginia coming up a little bit later. Hour number 3 today, I'm going to talk with Derek Van Orden, hero. Hero is a SEAL, hero on the Hill, and now a hero on the highway. And we'll talk with the author of the article who brought that to my attention, Selena Zito, a little bit later in the hour. Before I do the news, though, and there's a lot happening today, I want to pause and say rest in peace to Dr. Jim Dobson, who is a friend of mine. Dr. Dobson went to be with the Lord today at the age of 89. Very few people, not elected president of the United States, deserve the appellation of significant. Dr. Dobson was significant to tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans, primarily because of his work with families and parents through Focus on the Family. He had a little condominium over in politics as well, and that mattered. But what Dr. Dobson did, originally from Pasadena, then he moved all the Focus on the Family to Colorado Springs, and I got to know him. I would visit him in Colorado Springs and chat with him. He really wanted children in America to have parents who had fundamental grasp on how to raise boys and girls. And that's what he did the most in. That's what he is best remembered for. Of course, he is a big lighthouse in the world of Christian talk radio, in the world of Christian programming, in the world of Christian psychology, in the world of just children raising. Always common sense from Jim Dobson. He always prayed for revival in the United States. I think he's probably still praying for it today, but I'm always remember that what Dr. Moody said, someday you will hear that D.L. Moody is dead. No, not true. I am more alive than I have ever been before. I think that clearly applies to Jim Dobson, and blessings on his family as they deal with the loss of a beloved father and grandfather. I don't know if he's a great-grandfather, but he was a good man and a good friend. I had the honor of introducing him at the National Radio Hall of Fame induction in Chicago many years ago when he was inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. And it was a great honor. He's a great man, did so much good for so many hundreds of millions of people around the world and here in the United States. Now on to the news beyond Aaron and the departure of Dr. Dobson. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made an announcement that he's ordered immediate talks for the release of all hostages and ending the war under conditions acceptable to Israel. I have Noah Rothman and Seth Mandel coming up today. They are pretty good students of the Middle East. I'll ask them what they think is going on here. It comes one day after the IDF was attacked by a dozen Hamas terrorists, and they killed, not a dozen, dozens of terrorists. They killed 15, but one soldier was wounded seriously. He's not going to die, but he was wounded seriously. They emerged from a tunnel only 40 meters from an advanced forward operating base in Gaza. So it was a failure of surveillance on the part of the IDF because someone was wounded, but they did kill 15 terrorists. And I wonder if the terrorists do not feel the grip tightening around Gaza City as the IDF moves into and methodically just destroys the buildings that have been booby-trapped. They know they're booby-trapped. It's like Hamas is the wily coyote here trying to get the IDF to go into buildings, and the IDF isn't going to go into buildings that have been booby-trapped. They send in the automatic robots, and the automatic robots trip the wire, the building come down, and the IDF also shells those areas where they know there are tunnel openings. So I think maybe the Hamas has realized, while they have 20 Israeli hostages that the Israelis would really love to get back safely, that Netanyahu is not doing any partial deals. And if they want to get out with their lives, now is the time to negotiate hard for safe passage to Iran for however many Hamas terrorists want to go to Iran, and Iran will accept. A story that just makes me laugh because I told you it would happen. The New York appeals panel threw out the $500 million judgment against Donald Trump, and Arthur Engoron always struck me as a Bugs Bunny in robes kind of figure from Looney Tunes. And I'll say that tonight on Special Report if that topic comes up. He always struck, Juan Merchan struck me as malevolent. Arthur Engoron struck me as Bugs Bunny in robes. He just wasn't, you couldn't take him seriously. Letitia James, you can't take seriously either. Well, the New York Appeals Court threw it out 5-0, excessive. It's actually ridiculous. President Trump posted this: total victory in the fake New York State Attorney General Letitia James case. I greatly respect the fact that the court had the courage to throw out this unlawful and disgraceful decision that was hurting businesses throughout New York State. Others were afraid to do business there. The amount, including interest and penalties, was over $550 million. It was a political witch hunt, in a business sense, the likes of which no one has seen before. This was a case of election interference by the city and state trying to show illegally that I did things that were wrong when, in fact, everything I did was absolutely correct and even perfect. Every single dollar was thrown out, even the penalties imposed on us by the corrupt judge, one of the most overturned in history, Arthur Engoron. I wasn't given a jury, and during the course of the trial, which lasted a long time, was not given one ruling in my favor by this political act, but worse than him, it's possible, is Letitia James, a corrupt and incompetent attorney general, who only brought this case in order to hurt me politically. She is a Trump deranged lunatic. They made me bond the outrageous sum, which never happened before and which cost me millions of dollars a month. Should never have been allowed to happen, and everyone knew it. Importantly, the vote was 5-0. I am so honored by Justice David Friedman's great words of wisdom, which should be read by everyone. I would also like to thank the court for having the courage to make this decision, which is going to go down as one of the worst business persecutions in the history of our country. Sadly, there are other cases against me that are equally disgraceful, including those headed up by corrupt judges like Juan Merchan, whose daughter collected millions of dollars in fees from crooked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, while her father shockingly refused to recuse himself from the vicious and corrupt trial, which was also under appeal. One in which every legal pundit in New York said there was no case. By the way, every legal pundit, period. Even editorial board said, do not do this. Juan Merchan gave me an unprecedented gag order, not letting me talk about him or his daughter or the fact that appellate judges thought he should not be doing the case, but he did it anyway. Many lawyers said that his daughter and him created the greatest conflict of interest they'd ever seen. Judge Lewis Kaplan, the other remaining case, whose wife, family, and friends attended 2 trials, is as mean, as nasty as anyone I've ever met. That case also on appeal, also should never have been brought, and he should be admonished for abuse. And every other thing that can be thrown at a corrupt judge. He loved the publicity and would not let us present irrefutable evidence that we wanted to present. This Clinton-appointed judge should not be allowed to get away with this scam. End of Truth Social. I want people to focus on the fact that it was a charade. It was a joke, the $500+ million judgment, but it did cost Donald Trump millions of dollars. And everybody knew it was a joke. Does he get his money back? No, he doesn't get his money back. The court did not award him damages from the state of New York, but the state of New York ought to pay. And I really do hope he is thinking about bringing 1983 action against Letitia James, because she did violate his constitutional rights to free speech, his constitutional right to run for office. It was lawfare of the worst sort. And it's the same thing with Fani Willis. It's the same thing with Jack Smith. It's the same thing with Juan Merchan, and there were crazy people all over the country trying to keep him off of ballots. He had to fight through lawfare as thick as the hedgerows on Normandy Beach. No one was shooting at him until Butler, but then 2 people tried to shoot at him. 1 person hit him. I'm telling you, this is not without cost to the entire country when they lose confidence in the justice system. And Arthur Engoron should quit if he had any dignity. He should resign today, because losing 5-0, and I know a couple of judges said, oh, well, maybe there was some fraud here, but this is still excessive. It was ridiculous and absurd. And a joke like that injures the reputation of every judge in every courtroom across the United States of America. He is a blot on the idea of the rule of law, and he ought to resign. I'll bring you a lot more news. Don't go anywhere. We got a lot coming up. I want to talk with Noah Rothman about Israel. As I told you in the first segment, Prime Minister Netanyahu today said we are at a stage of decisive victory. I came to the Gaza division in order to approve the plans that the IDF presented to me. At the same time, I instructed to begin immediate negotiations for the release of all of our hostages and for ending the war under conditions acceptable to Israel. I'm joined by Noah Rothman, senior writer for National Review, to talk about that. Noah, I am confused, but maybe that's what Bibi wants us to be. What do you make of this?
Well, it's occurring simultaneously along with negotiations with Hamas for the release of these hostages. Hamas, over the course of the last 48, 72 hours, indicated that it was willing to accept the terms that were on offer as Israel was preparing for this final offensive into Gaza City. These two things are happening simultaneously. They can happen simultaneously. Hamas executes terrorist attacks and terrorist initiatives, even as it engages in negotiations with counterparts in Qatar, for example. So there's nothing unremarkable, especially about that. If the IDF operation is successful, it could very well represent something approaching an endgame to this very long war. The Israeli presence in southern Gaza is already pretty substantial, seems relatively secure. And there's the belief, as far as I understand it, that the remaining hostages, the living hostages, which is a minority of the existing hostages, are in Gaza City. And capturing that municipality, very dense, very urban, pretty beat up, could take quite some time. It'd be a very fraught operation. But there's very few other places for Hamas to go. So we could be looking at, if this continues and is successful, and is not just an effort by the Netanyahu government to force conditions on Hamas that compel it to recognize Israeli victory, we could be seeing a military end to this operation. I think Jerusalem would hope to see Hamas surrender in a very visible way, but in the absence of capitulation, this is the military end to this war. It's something that everybody who is frustrated with this war should want to see, including the Israelis, who are understandably exhausted with this very long conflict.
Now, I do think that under the pressure of the 2 years of combat, the Hamas remnant must be breaking down in terms of security discipline. They must be doing comms that are not secure. Israel must be hearing a lot of what they are talking to each other about. The whole deck of cards has been killed. I think there's a guy named Haddad who's allegedly running Hamas now, but they're down to a very handful relative to what they began with, weaponry. They've got new young volunteers, but they've got to be desperate, and they know that no one's coming to help them. All right, Iran's out of the game. Hezbollah is destroyed. Nobody's coming to help them. What do you think they're thinking right now?
Yeah, I don't know, because as you said, the leadership caste is gone. There is no leadership caste in Hamas. The exiled leadership abroad, I suppose we should say, has very limited contact, as far as we understand it, with the operatives on the ground. Haven't since Yahya Sinwar was neutralized some months ago. So we don't know what they're thinking. And as you say, there is a fair amount of panic abroad. There should be. If you were to survey the situation in southern Gaza, there's a lot of hopeful signs. There's efforts to establish something looking like a post-Hamas civilian leadership. The humanitarian efforts that are designed to frustrate United Nations access to Hamas. The United Nations provides Hamas with aid that it distributes. Distributes is a gentle word for it. Extorts the Palestinian population in order to have access to it. Severing that relationship between the United Nations and Hamas ends a lifeline for this institution. So you can see at the end of the tunnel glimmers of light that suggest we could look at a more hopeful future in the absence of Hamas. And it's a failure of imagination not to see how this could culminate in an Israeli victory as envisioned by the Netanyahu government on October 8th, 2023. But there is a long slog ahead. And as we saw from the campaign to allege that Israel was engaged in a cartoonishly malevolent, strategically inept effort to deliberately engineer a famine in Gaza, there's no tale that could be told about Israel that would not receive a friendly, warm hearing in certain quarters of the West. So when this operation gets underway in Gaza City, and it will be brutal, we're going to hear plenty of those stories.
They go out 24/7 on Al Jazeera. They're picked up repeatedly by BBC and other European broadcasters. And I was listening this morning to Call Me Back Insider. I had to cancel my subscription to The Atlantic this week because I'm now at the point where I no longer buy a new subscription unless I cancel an old one. So I bought Call Me Back Insider, and I canceled The Atlantic because I get value out of Call Me Back Insider. And they have on lefties like Nadav Eyal, but they also have on conservatives from Israel like Amit Segal. So today Nadav said, and Dan sort of agreed, I'm going to talk to him about this, we're getting killed in the world. We're getting killed in the world. The world opinion is killing us. And I thought to myself, no, world opinion on the left is killing you. It will never not kill you, but you've got to start saying or understanding half of America or 3/4 of America is with Israel and want Hamas killed, and they want the hostages back, and they support the tough love approach that Netanyahu is there. Do you think the Israelis worry too much or underestimate their friends abroad?
Perhaps, but that's also prudent. I mean, a prudential consideration of politics in the United States. Let's take Europe out of it because Europe's a pretty unreliable partner when it comes to Israel. But in the United States, if you're an Israeli nationalist, patriot, you do have to be concerned about the extent to which the Democratic Party has become an anti-Israel party from the grassroots up. The Democratic Party will not be out of power in the United States forever. And if you're looking to the future of Israel and its relations with the United States, they must be bipartisan to a certain extent, or else you really are opening yourself up to the prospect of a schism when the Republican Party is no longer in power. That said, there are some indications that the robotic, mechanical repetition of the pro-Hamas talking points that Democratic elected officials occasionally mouth has become embarrassing. And I'm looking at the case of Catherine Clark, the House Democratic whip out of Massachusetts, who at a fundraiser not too long ago said some really rote liberal things about how there's genocide and starvation in Israel, and also the Texas redistricting stuff is terrible. I mean, it was the same breath in which she said these two things. So they amount to shibboleths, just the price of admission into the club of progressive politics. And the world came down around her shoulders, and she subsequently didn't apologize, but retracted the claim because it wasn't substantiated. So we're seeing now, too long later, 6 weeks later, after this ubiquitous, universal campaign to allege that Israel was deliberately starving Palestinian civilians. To what end, no one ever said. But that is beginning to fall away. You don't hear that very much anymore because it was an extraordinary claim that existed without the extraordinary supporting evidence that it needed to subsist, and it just died on the vine. So the truth went out. It took a long time, but the truth went out.
Well, this is what,
and that's the sort of thing that Israelis need to take stock of.
Yeah, Israel needs to understand the truth does win out, at least in the United States, and the Democrats who are putting their arms around this narrative, they may be the reason behind the decline in voter registration of Democrats that it was chronicled by none other than the New York Times. And it's a death spiral, to quote someone in the article, a death spiral for the Democrats, what they've done, and embracing Hamas as one of their talking points is part of that death spiral. Follow Noah over at National Review, or follow him on X at Noah C. Rothman. I want to remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Here's my Relief Factor right here. I got to take it because I did my 6.2 today, my 10K, and a little bit difficult. It has not been a regular outing. It normally is for the last many weeks that the grandkids were around, because all hands on deck when you've got that many smalls around. But there's the Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, and I take it. Why do I take it every day? Because I like to feel good every day. I like to get out there and do 6 miles. I want to be able to talk to you about it. I want you to try it. I want you to call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, and get the starter pack for $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Those are the 4 natural supplements. I take them every day in the first hour of the program, Monday through Friday, earlier in the day on Saturday and Sunday. And I want you to please remember that the starter pack is what you ask for if you call 1-800-4-RELIEF, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. But you can find the starter pack at their website as well, at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. When you try it, you will thank me. Find it at relieffactor.com. Now, when I was on that trundle this morning, I stopped at the turnaround, and I was a little bit late in getting out the door. And there's only a couple of places up here where there's signal outside of my brother-in-law's house. And I went and got the signal, and before I left, I began thinking, this tech sell-off is really stupid. This market report is brought to you by AmericanFederal.com, by the way. If you're going to buy or sell gold, and I'll give you the price of gold at the end of this, call American Federal at 800-221-7694, 800-221-7694. So I didn't have any individual stocks until mid-trundle this morning, when I stopped and called the successor to Rich Botkin, who is retired. I said, Clay, I want to get back into Palantir. Oh, okay. Now, I love brokers that do not argue with you or do not call you and recommend stuff. I love people who do what I want them to do right away. And so we talked about how much, and I said, I have a feeling this is ridiculous, what's going on in the market. It's an August reset, and I don't think it's a bubble. I think AI is real. I read news items. I see the amount of actual capital investment in artificial intelligence, and I think Palantir is a leader of that. So is Amazon a bubble? No. Amazon is real. Is Google a bubble? No. It takes 20 years. So I got out of Palantir after I'd made some money in it, and I only had mutual funds, cash, and dirt and gold. And so I was diversified, but I didn't have any individual stocks. And I called them and said, I want to get back into Palantir. It's down at around 155, off of its highs at 185, 186. And so I did. I tell you that so that you always know what my portfolio is. I did not buy gold today. I bought Palantir. But I might have bought gold as well. But I didn't. I bought Palantir. Gold is not down. It's down $3. It's at $3,385 an ounce. Everything else has been falling for 6 days in a row. And it's not a correction. It's kind of an August swoon. But it's on. There's no news to drive it. Maybe if the NVIDIA earnings after the bell today are bad, it would justify what's going on. But I looked at gold this morning, and I thought, well, gold is exactly where I want it to be, climbing steadily, 3,385. People might want to get into it. Then I started thinking about maybe they want to get into Palantir, which I think is going to climb steadily as well. I do not. That's not a recommendation. Talk to your own broker. All right, I do not give stock tips. I don't know enough. There are too many people out there. I just follow the AI capital investment, the massive one. Don't want to buy an AI fund because some of them are not going to be good, and some of them already have achieved breakthrough, like Palantir. If Anduril was publicly traded, I would buy Anduril because the combination of artificial intelligence and defense, as is Palantir. But I really do think this is an overstated stock market correction, and sure enough, it's going on today. The Dow is down about 1/3 of a point as we come up half hour before close. S&P down 1/3 of a point, and the NASDAQ down 1/3 of a point. But Palantir has gone up $1.50, $2 since I bought it this morning. I have intuitions, and it's my money, so I get to decide what to do with it. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt lets me run that part of the portfolio, and I play around a little bit with stuff like that, but I don't sell my gold ever. And if you want to buy gold, do it from Nick Grovich, 800-221-7694. Because like my broker, Nick is not going to tell you to do or not do something. He is going to help you execute what you want to do. If you want to buy it or if you want to sell it, you call Nick and his team, and it's completely transparent. Spot price plus minus the commission. Call Nick and talk to him about it, 800-221-7694. Because gold just looks very stable to me. $3,385. I've got as much as I want until January, and I'll buy some more wherever it is because dollar cost average income investing works. Pleased to welcome back the governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. Governor Youngkin, welcome. I wanted to get an update from you on preparedness with Hurricane Aaron, far off the coast, but still causing problems in the tidal regions of North Carolina and the Commonwealth. What's up?
Yeah, Hugh, thanks for having me, and thanks for starting in a really important place. Of course, Hurricane Aaron's still a Category 2 hurricane, and it's far off the coast, but it's a giant storm. And as a result, we're seeing the effects of a tropical storm in Virginia with really, really dangerous rough surf, rip tides, and tidal flooding. The rain has been a little lighter today than we had forecasted, which is a great thing. We are still telling everybody stay out of the water. and let this storm blow through, and then we're praying that it blows out quick. But I just appreciate the tremendous work from our first responder community to be prepared and be ready. And I have to say, that's what we've done really well in Virginia, is to be ahead of these things, put big resources in place, and make sure that if there is an emergency, we're ready to respond.
Now, Governor, I've watched firsthand how much good you brought to the Commonwealth over the last 3.5 years. But the school districts of Northern Virginia seem strangely dug in on ridiculous gender ideology, despite your best efforts to get them to change. Have you given up on that fight? Because they are ideologically driven. They are not driven by concerns of parents and grandparents for their kids.
Yeah, we're never giving up, Hugh. We're going to fight for kids every single day and make sure that everybody fully appreciates the fact that kids belong to parents, not to government, not to administrators. And we've got to continue to fight this. Now, we have a partner in that fight today that I didn't have for the first 3 years, and that's Donald Trump in the White House. And the fact that the Title IX violation has been brought against the 5 counties in Northern Virginia, they are, of course, fighting back. And just this week, Secretary McMahon put them on high risk, meaning she's going to start taking their funding away. We also see the craziness in Loudoun County, just to pick one of the craziest right now, with these 3 young boys who were in the locker room last spring and really felt uncomfortable that there was a biological girl in the locker room with them. And instead of the school district investigating the girl in the locker room with them, they investigated the 3 boys. And in fact, have brought a charge against the boys' permanent record for 2 of them. And it's just absolute insanity, in my view, that you have biological boys in a locker room who are uncomfortable with a biological girl being in a locker room with them, and the boys get in trouble. It's crazy. And so
now, Governor,
this is the kind of stuff that we see over and over again, and that's why I'm so pleased to have friends in the federal government now who are helping us fight this fight.
The Democratic Party is in a spiral to the left. I don't know that, there's elections in Virginia for the rest of the country this November. Governor Youngkin is termed out. Winsome Sears is our nominee, meaning the Republican nominee. I'll have her on often and early as we get close to it. And of course, Attorney General Mayorkas can run again. I think I've got that mispronounced. But the fact is, do you think Democrats are losing ground in Virginia because the party is going left, Governor Youngkin?
Well, this race is going to be tight, but the Democrats are on such the wrong side of every single issue. And it's as if they see common sense and turn the other direction. And we've just started with education. I mean, let's just be clear. This is a progressive left ideology that believes that biological boys should play sports with biological girls, that biological boys should be in girls' locker rooms and girls in boys' locker rooms. This is an ideology that believes that you should dumb down standards so you should feel better about how your child is doing. This is the same group that locked the kids out of schools and said, hey, a 12-inch screen's a quality education, and then Virginia had the largest learning loss in the nation. We've gone to work, get them back in the classroom. We just had the largest decrease in chronic absenteeism in the country because of the work we've been doing. They are on the wrong side of every issue. They're on the wrong side of the criminal issue right now. We're seeing in Washington that it takes President Trump's enforcement of the law in order to bring down crime in a city that was absolutely rampant. And in fact, the only reason why it hadn't been done before is because they actually feel that reducing criminal penalties is the right thing. And guess what? Crime goes up. And then, of course, in Virginia, the last thing that we're clearly fighting is economic prosperity. And, of course, when Winsome and Jason and I were elected in 2021, we went to work and we built a rip-roaring economy, $125 billion in business investment commitments with 80,000 jobs coming, 267,000 jobs already created, and 250,000 jobs open and available today. And yet Abigail Spanberger, who's Winsome's opponent, wants to have forced unionization in Virginia. She wants to get rid of our right to work. She fundamentally believes in regulation, and we've been deregulating like crazy. And, of course, all that will do is drive away business as opposed to grow it. This is a clear distinction between radical left policies that are failing or have failed everywhere in the country and, of course, common sense conservative policies that work.
Let me ask you one quick exit question before we run out of time, Governor. You just landed, I think, a $50 billion investment in drug manufacturing expansion in Virginia. Do you think that a Spanberger win could imperil that kind of investment? Because that was a big deal. I can't remember the name of the company. It's a big one from Europe.
Yeah, AstraZeneca, they're going to
That's
put
it.
$50 billion into the United States. We'll get the biggest piece of that in Virginia. And the bottom line is that it is deregulation. The bottom line is it is lowering cost on business, and it's driving all of the business-friendly environment that attracts them. And Abigail Spanberger stands against all of that. Winsome Sears stands for all of it. It's just that clear. Winsome's been my partner in doing this for the last 3.5 years. She knows how to do it. And Abigail Spanberger's never run anything. She's been a congresswoman. That's the biggest staff she's ever run. There's no way she's going to be able to run an $80 billion a year budget with 110,000 employees. It's beyond her. And at the end of the day, Winsome is prepared and ready, and Abigail is unprepared and not ready.
Well, I appreciate your bringing that up and your support for the Lieutenant Governor, and I appreciate your vigilance on the coast as Aaron, I hope, stays far out to sea. We'll check in with you if we have to. Thank you for the time today to get that warning out again to people in tidal areas of Southern Virginia. Just be aware, stay vigilant, do not go into the water. It's a very easy message. Governor Glenn Youngkin, always a pleasure. Thank you, Governor. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm coming right back, always bringing you the headlines as they break. And I'm going to be joining Brett Baird tonight on Special Report. A reminder that you want to tune in to find out what the panel has to say about the big win for Donald Trump in the New York Appeals Court that threw out the ridiculous judgment against him. But where does he go to get back the interest on the bond he was obliged to? It cost him millions and millions and millions of dollars. Of course, he can afford it, but that's not the point. The point is the miscarriage of justice ought to be remedied by someone named Letitia James. I want to tell you a story that brings up webroot.com, which is a sponsor of mine, webroot.com/Hewitt. You can get either Webroot Essentials, or you can go to webroot.com/Hewitt and you can get the Webroot Total Protection Package. There are two options there at webroot.com/Hewitt. The reason it's top of mind, got a call yesterday from a bank. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have paid out the mortgage on our house, but I keep a home equity line of credit on it. And in case we need money in a hurry and don't want to sell something because it's a bad time in the market. And so there's a HELOC on it, thanks to AndrewandTodd.com. I'll tell you about them a little bit later. And the bank that did the HELOC, I know the bank officer who did it, and Anthony and I talk all the time, and he wants to know how we're doing, and he's a good banker. And I got a call from an 800 number. I don't answer 800 numbers, didn't realize. And the message, which I copied, it's transcribed automatically. Hi, it's Comerica Bank, and we would like to have you call us back about your loan. Now, they never do that. So I sent Anthony a note. I said, Anthony, is this legit? Because I don't think this is legit. And he immediately wrote me, don't call him back. That's not legit. I didn't call him back. I sent him another note. And I said, I think you ought to tell Bank Security about that. How do they know that I have a loan with Comerica? And I don't have a loan. I have a HELOC. And he said, we don't know, but I already told Bank Security. Now, a lot of the cyber crooks out there target people who are over 65, and that includes me. And they think we're off our game. You get a lot of phishing scams. They're pretty easy to spot if you click on the sender email and it says it's from your bank or from your broker, or it's from Apple or something like that, or Amazon. And you click on the email and you realize it's not really Amazon.com or Apple.com. And you say, okay, that's phishing. You just delete. Wouldn't you rather be not getting those? Wouldn't you rather be protected from having your passwords stolen? Wouldn't you rather have computer support? That's what webroot.com/Hewitt will do for you. Webroot.com/Hewitt. Get 50% off right now. Total Protection or Essentials. Webroot Total Protection or Essentials. You get a password manager, system organizer, identity protection. They monitor the dark web, the deep web. You get credit alerts when someone's trying to mess with your credit, pretending to be you. You get up to $1 million in reimbursement for stolen funds. They will back up and restore your computer at any moment. But right now, 50% off Webroot Total Protection. And that, again, everyone gets one every day. That's my theory on phishing. But you might get tricked. And the fact I read in news items today, voice impersonation is not a future threat, it's here now. if my voice can be impersonated by anyone because there's like 1,000 million hours of me talking out there, but we will never fall for the Grandpa, I'm in jail in Mexico scam, which happened to a friend of mine. Even when they're old enough to be in jail in Mexico, I know it's not them, but a lot of seniors get duped. Go and get webroot.com and at least protect your own personal identity and your own devices. Up to 10 devices in the family can be protected by webroot.com/Hewitt. Get either of the packages. Thank you for watching on the Salem News Channel, listening on the Salem Radio Network, listening on one of our great affiliates. One of our affiliates is in harm's way today, WZPR 92.3 FM. Salem Radio on the Outer Banks, broadcasting on a Nag's Head. Don't go in the water. So the storm surge could be about 4 feet. It's not a direct hit or anything like last year's disaster in North Carolina. But Aaron is a monster storm. It's got monster currents and lots of rain in different places, a lot of surge in different places. Please be careful on the Outer Banks and in Southern Virginia. As it moves north, I'll keep posting you up on that. I want to turn to J.D. Vance's interview with Laura Ingraham last night, but I also want to tell you, I often communicate with our Universe subscribers. These are people who want to belong to the Universe, and they pay for it. They're subscribers. And I do read every text I get from them, and I often text them. Before the show, I texted them after reading about Prime Minister Netanyahu saying he's ready to negotiate a complete hostage release deal. And so I asked the subtext members of the Universe, what's good enough for you? And their answers are, and I said, would you accept a partial deal? Absolutely not. That's from Peter. Release all hostages or no deal. Enough of their games. Lawrence. Absolutely not. And even then, you'd likely just get 20 body bags back anyway. It's time to cut out the tactics short of complete surrender from Charlie. 20 live and all the dead or no deal. From Edward. I would not accept anything less than the full release of hostages, full surrender or exile of Hamas. From Ron. No deal that doesn't include all of the 20 remaining living hostages. From Stephen. No, don't stop now. From Jim. Get them all back or what is left of them. Eradicate Hamas completely. Make an example of them or anybody else who thinks they can take on Israel. From Gary. Deborah. No, Hamas is the criminal. Brian. Sorry, I meant he should not. I don't know. I'm reading them down, so I didn't get the first one, Brian. Dennis. Certainly never do it. John. No deal if all the hostages are not released. David. If Israel accepts less than all the hostages, they will have lost the war. Ward. No, release them all. Enough of this. Finish it otherwise. William. Not a chance. IDF must finish the job and ignore the protests. Anna Marie, I really believe they and the country need to be free of Hamas. My heart goes out to the hostages, though. Greg, no, minimum acceptable officers, everyone's still alive. David, you'd think the living hostages would be the minimum. I think that would work, and then even if they let the remnants of Hamas continue. That's the first one that's been, maybe. Pat, no, it's all Hamas continuing to holding Israel at bay, so to speak. And there are lots more. Complete victory, writes Mark McAllen. All living hostages return. Mark, that's your second one, so I got to find the first one. Dwayne, no hostages released, no deal. Thomas, that's from Thomas Valletta, accept no deal without the hostages. Mary, Netanyahu should move forward with clearing Gaza City quickly and decisively, realizing the subhuman Hamas may kill the hostages. That's easy for Americans to say, but a lot of Israelis think that too. No more human torture should be tolerated, says William. 10 hostages if they get all the countries to call out their Palestine state recognition. Interesting from Christopher. Absolutely not. Israel is in control and should never give up that advantage, says Mary. I've lived in the Sahara, and now you got them stuck fighting in the intertribal wars. Absolutely do not. Absolutely not, says Anita. No deal. Get the people back, Chris O'Dell. Scott, I know this is hard-hearted. I am from the school of thought, the movie Speed. Shoot the hostage, take them out of the equation. If I'm ever taken hostage, I expect the good guys to come in guns a-blazing. The only way we're ever going to stop the bad guys from using this evil strategy. Scott, I don't know that movie. No deal without the 20, says Scott Johnson. I'm pretty hard line on this. The minimum should be the releasing of all the hostages, says Kathy. No, Israel should accept nothing less than the return of all hostages, plus disarming dissolution of Hamas, says John. No, all 20, says Chuck. No, says Charles. Unconditional surrender with full backing of U.S., FAFO, Jean, I guess. Release all. Earn at least some goodwill. Bob. No, John Anderson. Terrorists should be allowed to surrender under a huge flag and be transported to a country that will take them. Robert. I'm amazed. It just flowed in. I just said, what should Bibi do? Because he said, I'm ready to accept. And I asked, should he accept something less than all the hostages? And the avalanche. I read them all, but that's just the first 30. If you want to text with me, by the way, you got to join the universe. I know some of you email Hugh at hughhewitt.com. It's our dead letter box. Dwayne goes through it once a century. But if you want to talk to me, you got to text me at subtext via the universe. And I'm very glad to get your answers on this. Now I want to go to J.D. Vance last night with Laura Ingraham. Cut number 1.
So I don't want to get ahead of any administration announcements, but we are looking at a whole host of points of leverage we can exercise over California and other states to make sure they comply with the law. Sanctuary cities are killing people because you allow these violent criminals to set up shop in your cities. Obviously, you saw this case with the person who murdered people on the road, 3 people on the road, because he couldn't even read the road signs. We have a lot of points of leverage here, but fundamentally, I think the American people have to stand with us here. Because when we go and tell the governor of California or the governor of New York that you have to stop putting the interests of illegal aliens over American citizens, we need the American people to stand with us. And I think that they will. I think that they are. But we're definitely not going to let this slide, Laura. You can't do it. You've got to stop putting the interests of foreigners who don't have the right to be here over the interests of American citizens. That is the entire point and purpose of the Democratic Party. If you go back to the election of 2024, what was the big issue? The big issue was illegal immigration. They were actually defending the rights of illegal immigrants to come into our country, to vote in our elections, to collect Social Security and Medicaid that ought by right go to American citizens, to say nothing of housing. This is actually the biggest driver of housing costs in some of these big blue cities, is that they've flooded the zone with illegal immigrants. As we've kicked illegal aliens out of our country, you actually see housing costs start to level off. So fundamentally, the difference between Republicans and Democrats is we care about American citizens. They actually don't like American citizens and want to replace them with low-wage foreigners. It's a very stark difference, and I think the American people are going to continue to reward us because of it.
He also talked about the midterms, cut number 2.
I think we have a good chance, but take nothing for granted, Laura. You have the Democrats are still trying to register illegal aliens. They still explicitly say that they want illegal aliens to vote in federal elections. We still have, I think, a lot of headwinds from the media. They never tell the truth about what we're doing, about what the president has accomplished for the American people. So don't rest on our laurels. Keep on achieving victories for the American people and keep on trying to win. That's our path to being able to continue to govern this country. I'm not going to bank anything in 2026. We just have to keep working at it.
Let's go. And then he talked about the push to end crime in D.C., cut number 5.
Violent crime has dropped in D.C. 35% in 9 days. Robberies in D.C. have dropped 55% in 9 days. And it highlights the fact that this living with lawlessness and disorder, that's fundamentally a question of political will. If you've got the political will to enforce the law, you can make even cities like D.C. safe again. And that's what we're demonstrating. And I hope that the American people take an important lesson from this, because obviously D.C. is a federal city, New York, L.A., these places are not. I hope the American people just recognize that you don't have to live with lawlessness. You don't have to live with third world murder rates. If you just take control of these cities, you can make them safe places to live.
More JD, cut number 6.
So I thought, what a good show of moral support to have the vice president and some of the senior team at the White House show up. We bought him some burgers, hang out with him a little bit. And actually, the most interesting thing, Laura, was after the cameras left, Pete and Steve and I stayed and, had lunch with these troops and just learned a lot about what they're seeing, about how much the city has changed in just the past 9 days.
Also talked about Democrats and their traditional base in urban communities, cut number 4.
I don't know why Democrats seem to love public disorder and chaos almost as a political ideology. And I think that part of what's going on is Democrats have gotten so divorced from the communities that they allegedly serve that they don't realize the gross majority of residents in D.C., they want to walk through Union Station and just have a bite to eat or enjoy the space with their families. They don't realize that so many people have been absolutely terrorized by Democrat crime policies. And so maybe they just don't make the connection between what Gavin Newsom says and the fact that places like D.C. or Los Angeles have some of the highest murder rates in the world.
He's very good at this. And I got to tell you, the Union Station is the perfect example because it's gone through a couple of cycles. When I first moved to D.C. in 1983, you didn't really want to take a train anywhere. You had to, but it was a very sketchy place. By the time I came back in 2015, in between I would come back and forth and come in and out of Union Station. It would be beautiful. It got, D.C. became an oasis, a renaissance, a beautiful place, including places like 14th Street where you would never have gone when we lived in the city from 83 to 89 as young newlyweds and then working. But now, Union Station, in the last 5 years I've been back, it's really a terrible place, full of homelessness, dangerous, and they've cleaned it up, and now commuters are back taking Amtrak again. Good on them. The biggest political story of the day is that the Letitia James witch hunt and the $500 million judgment against Donald Trump for civil fraud has been thrown out. Unanimous decision, 5-0, excessive penalty, violated the Eighth Amendment. And that's what caught my attention. The 5 opinions total more than 500 pages, so I cannot tell you that I've read them. I try and read opinions before I comment on them, but I've seen the reports that everyone agreed it was an excessive penalty and violate of the Eighth Amendment. So that means that Letitia James sought and received an unconstitutional punishment of Donald Trump, which means that 42 U.S.C. 1983 comes into play. Donald Trump and any American can sue any governmental official who violates their constitutional rights under the color of state law. And that is intended to stop state actors like the Attorney General of New York and Judge Engoron from coming after you with an unconstitutional animus using unconstitutional. You could also make a due process argument that the whole thing was a fraud from the start because the Attorney General had announced before she took office that she would use her office to pursue a witch hunt against Donald Trump. But I hope he is considering a private action, a 1983 case is what we call it, against the AG and against this judge. This judge is a joke. He's an embarrassment for everyone who ever wore a robe. I've only sat judge pro tem a few times, and I enjoyed it, but it also was very time-consuming. I thought I'd done my good deeds for the day. Back in the day when I was in California practicing law actively, I would sit pro tem when they needed someone up in North Court for small claims or traffic or whatever it is that they needed. They didn't let non-judge judges do much other than small claims in traffic court. But I was happy to do it. It's not an easy job, but it's really a difficult job when you're a political hatchet job trying to make, I don't know, a name for yourself, enjoy your moments in the sun, get the applause of the ridiculous left wing in New York. I don't know what Engoron had on his mind, but he ought to have shut that down, and now he's been slapped down very, very hard. 5-0 excessive penalty. 5-0. Still cost Donald Trump millions of dollars in interest for the bond he was obliged to post. And you may not remember this. There was a period of time when people wondered if he didn't post it, what will happen to the president? Will they seize Trump Tower? And Letitia James was saying she was ready to go over and padlock Trump Tower. Do you remember all that? The lawfare? That's only a year ago. And it helped Donald Trump. Thank you, A.G. James, for getting Donald Trump elected and getting the Iranian nuclear program destroyed, allowing Israel to fight back, allowing the country to deregulate, getting the one big beautiful bill passed. That's all on the good side of bad people doing bad things. Boomerang effects. Very happy with that. Now let me do a good thing for you, especially if you're over 50. I want to tell you about consumercellular.com. You can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh, or you can call 1-800-411-4454 and get a good deal, the Hugh 25 deal. It's an additional $5 off what I'm about to tell you for 5 months. $25 saving, Hugh 25. That's the code you use whether you go to consumercellular.com/Hugh or whether you call 1-800-411-4454. Do you know how much you're actually paying for your cellular call? Do you know what your cell phone bill is? Do you have any idea how much data you're buying and not using? Sort of like throwing out food that you don't cook. That's data that you don't use. You can have savings without sacrifice. Now, if you're one of those people and you're over 50 and you want unlimited data because it makes you feel comfortable, and this is only for 50 years old and older. If you're over 50, you can have 2 lines with unlimited data for $60. That's $30 for each line, unlimited data. That allows you to get the security of unlimited data and still save a lot of money. But Consumer Cellular has a bunch of different plans for people who got that bill in front of them and they see they're using 5 gigs a month. They're just not really using that much data. They'll get you really low cost, much lower than you are paying. Most people never bother to look. And at the end of the year, they've wasted $500, $1,000, maybe more from the phone system because Big Cellular is never going to tell you they can save you money. They're just not going to tell you that. And there's a reason that there are a lot of cell phone companies popping up, but one of them you get savings without sacrifice. That's consumercellular.com/Hugh. Remember to use the code HUGH25 to save $5 a month for each of the first 5 months. And the phone number is 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. consumercellular.com/Hugh. Donald Trump has ordered the Pentagon to deploy 3 warships off the coast of Venezuela. They're going to interdict with the Maduro Navy, the Maduro drug runners. They're going to get Maduro. Donald Trump regrets he didn't get him the first time around. He's going to get him this time around. Maduro is a criminal. He's a cartel head. Venezuela is basically a cartel just like Syria was. I told you about the Syrian cartel yesterday with Captagon. Well, we are now dispatching 3 destroyers off the coast of Venezuela. They're going to shoot to sink. All right, so to the drug runners down there, be aware. Meanwhile, Russian missile attacks in Ukraine, the largest in weeks. Zelensky alerts that Moscow struck a U.S. civilian factory, that it shows no signs of wanting to end the war. President Trump said Ukraine has no chance of winning the war without striking Russia. That is the sort of tone one associates with Donald Trump, who's about to swing very hard in Ukraine's favor if Putin does not come through with some kind of an agreement on talks and a ceasefire. It's unclear what he meant by that. I think it's very clear that he intends Putin to realize there are going to be no limits on what Ukraine can do with the weaponry that the United States provides to Europe to provide to Ukraine. The United States is not going to put boots on the ground, but all the leaders agree. Ukraine gets to fight back and Ukraine gets to take the gloves off. This is not the Biden era. Okay, you can have this, but you can't have this. It's not the Obama era. Here are some blankets and meals ready to eat. This is Trump 2.0, and he's not messing around. And there have been conversations whether Trump will lift all restrictions on Ukraine's weapon usage of weapons made from the United States. I hope he does, because Trump is trying to add pressure to Putin, and that's how you add pressure to Putin, that way. Let me remind you about Relief Factor. I got my 6 miles in today. Feel great. Did not go fast because I'm getting back up to trying to go fast again after basically a 4-week intermittent exercise other than chasing 3-year-olds and picking them up. Relief Factor is for you if you've got any minor aches and pains whatsoever, whether it comes from commuting or 3-year-olds, whether it comes from working out at the gym or because you missed a step and you landed bad, whatever it is that gives you an ache or a pain. If you're using a heating pad, Relief Factor is for you. If you're using over-the-counter, Aleve, ibuprofen, anything, Relief Factor is better. It's all natural. I've been using it for more than a decade. It's the only supplement I've taken in over 20 years. I'm not a big supplement person. The only supplement is Relief Factor, which has 4 pills every day. If you call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, you can get a starter pack for $19.95 that will last you 3 weeks. Or simply go to their website and find the starter pack for less than $1 a day, $19.95. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Jonathan Williams is the CEO of our colleagues at the American Legislative Exchange Council. Jonathan is also the chief economist at ALEC. You can go to alec.org anytime you want, but if you want to get the weekly newsletter, alec.org/Hugh. Jonathan, I'm glad to see you again. I see Michigan in the background, peeking over the Upper Peninsula, which really belongs to Wisconsin. but we'll talk about that some other day. I read your op-ed in The Hill about Iowa and other states. Why don't you tell people what you were writing about? Because it's not just the taxes, it's also the spending.
Well, and that's the common sense approach that we like to take at ALEC, and is just the basic of what states have to do every single year. 49 out of the 50 states have balanced budget amendments in their constitution or state law. And so the linkage between great tax policy that we often talk about and these huge wins of states moving to flat taxes or trying to remove their income taxes for economic growth reasons, Hugh, the way to do that is by spending less and prioritizing your spending. And so the piece I had in The Hill was really giving some much needed kudos to Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa, ALEC alumni member when she was a state senator, and the Iowa legislators who have come in and done that heavy lifting on the spending side of the equation. One of the things that stuck out to me as we were looking at this, Hugh, is Iowa has actually consolidated agencies down to about 50% reduction in total government agencies across Iowa. I mean, they were kind of doing Doge before it was cool here in Washington, but it's a great testament to the great work of Governor Reynolds and the legislators in Iowa.
People can hold it up as an example of what to do. Let's do an example of what not to do. Tabor in Colorado is close to being sacred. You know, and I've been in and out of Colorado for 30 years. I taught at Colorado Christian one semester. I love the place. But Tabor, I don't know what it stands for. John Andrews and everyone tell me they'll never move Tabor. Now the Democrats in Colorado are trying to, it's basically a tax freeze. What are they trying to do to Tabor?
Yeah, Tabor, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights has been in the Colorado state constitution for more than 30 years now, and it really puts the brakes on overspending and overtaxing, and has been the one thing I think you can point to look at Colorado and where it's gone politically, very blue lately and progressive in its politics. It's been the one thing in its state constitution that has kept the state from becoming California East, and that is it doesn't allow government to grow faster than the economy. I know it's a novel concept, but I mean, back to this idea of balancing spending and taxing. And so you have the far left progressives in Colorado trying to dismantle it because they think, and rightly so, that is their impediment to making Colorado a welfare state and have it be a big government state. Voters, every time they have it as an option on the ballot to retain or to repeal Tabor, now for more than 30 years have overwhelmingly voted to keep that common sense limit in the Colorado Constitution, Hugh.
It reminds me of Prop 13 in California. It's the one thing that Californians have is that they put Prop 13 in 1978, and every attempt to repeal it has failed, but they do nibble away at the margins out there as California nibbles away against the ability to do business completely, including Bed Bath & Beyond. So let's talk about what did Bed Bath & Beyond say in a message to California this week, John Williams?
Well, this is something everybody needs to check out, the official statement from the executive chairman at Bed Bath & Beyond, because they said what we've been saying, Hugh, for now more than 2 decades at ALEC, which is California is nearly uninvestable for certain types of businesses. And they said it directly, that the statement wasn't about politics. It was about reality for Bed Bath & Beyond becoming California so high cost, whether it's taxes or labor regulations or other costs of doing business. It's something that has now driven yet another employer out of the state. And Gavin Newsom had somewhat of a pathetic response where he tried to throw some shade at the business instead of addressing the root cause. You know, instead of projecting against businesses, it would seem a little bit more of a good approach for California and other liberal states to actually look at themselves in the mirror and say, what is it that is causing businesses to flee? And by the way, keeping businesses from coming and investing in our state.
You know, there's a celebrity chef, Andrew Gruel, and Chef Gruel was on with Ben Domenech on the Big Ben podcast. The cost of running a restaurant in California is extraordinary, John. I could not believe it. No wonder the state is collapsing. Do you think that they will ever get the parachute and pull the ripcord?
Well, you have to hope so. I mean, I think, I'm an optimist, Hugh, as you know. I mean, I think there's hope for every state. If it can be turned around in places like West Virginia and others, I think it can be turned around anywhere. But first you have to acknowledge you have a problem, right? That's the first step. Stop digging the hole deeper. And certainly with Gavin Newsom in the governor's seat, that's not going to happen anytime soon in California.
I'm afraid not. But if you're a California legislator and you're listening right now, join ALEC. Go to alec.org/u if you want the State of the States weekly newsletter, alec.org/u, alec.org/u. And don't forget, find out how your state stacks up at richstatespoorstates.com. They'll send you the free book, best book you can have in your house. Every visitor will read it. I swear to you, every visitor immediately goes to their state to see how they rank. richstatespoorstates.com. Thank you, John. The home market is very difficult right now. It's difficult for a lot of reasons. Home prices have not come down, and buyers are not going up. And so there's a disconnect between inventory and demand. That is not helped by high interest rates. But some people have to move, and some people have to refinance because they've got credit card debt or student loan debt, or they have unexpected expenses, and they're sitting on a 3.5% or a 4% loan, and they're thinking, I'm never going to refinance. I'm never going to refinance because even though my house has gone up in value, refinancing is not for me because I don't want to have a 6% or higher interest rate. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172, or go to AndrewandTodd.com. They've been advertising and sponsoring this show for more than a decade. Thousands of you have done your loans with you. Thousands of you have done original, first trust deed loans, and some of you, many of you, have done refinances with them. Now, it is coming into the era where refinancing is now about 50% of the home loan market in America. And they've noticed it. I talk to Andrew at least once a week. I talk to Todd occasionally as well. They've noticed it that a lot of people are refinancing and giving up their 4%, turning it in for 6.5%, because they have to get money out of their house. And they do the math for you. Does that make sense for you? It depends on how much do you owe, how much do you need. Your bank, your best bank is your home. Your home equity is your best, most liquid asset. Banks are not going to lend to you at anywhere remotely close to 6.5%, but your house will. So if you need money, you may have to give up that 4%. You may have to bite that bullet and give it up. If you are wanting to talk it through, call Andrew Del Rey or Todd Avakian. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are lenders. They actually underwrite the loan. They do not give bad advice. They do not upsell. They're wonderful human beings, and that's why they've been sponsors of this program for more than 10 years, and why everybody I know uses them in my family. Everybody that listens to this show uses them. Dwayne uses them. Everyone in Salem uses them, because Sierra Pacific gets it done, and they do not upsell you. You're not going to get nickeled and dimed to death on charges here and charges there. They want to earn your business. They want to earn your family's business. They want to refinance you and get your second home when you move up in your third home, and when you downsize when you're 60, they want to do that. They want to be your bankers, your mortgage bankers for life. So call them, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. I want to go back now to some audio from Abby Phillip of CNN talking with Kara Swisher. Now, Kara Swisher is way from the left. Oh, we've got Selena? Selena Zito joins us. Hello, Selena. How are you?
Hi, Sunshine. How are you?
I am great. I'm going to talk next hour with Derek Van Orden because of the column you wrote about him. How did you get that story?
Well, I have covered Derek since he first decided to run, and he gave me a call and said, "You will not believe just what just happened." Well, I had just left that area. I had just been at my annual drive across the country, and I also knew that it was the anniversary of his daughter's passing, 2-year anniversary, and I had written before about how he had saved someone's life. And so this is now the third time he has saved someone's life in like 2 years.
Well, I'm going to talk to him about that next hour. People do not miss that. Congressman Van Orden, SEAL for many, many years, longest serving enlisted man to ever be elected to Congress. So a lot of enlisted men have been elected to Congress, but he is the one who served the longest in uniform as an enlisted man. So you don't want to miss that. Selena, we had a lot of reaction to when we were talking about who's going to play you in the movie Butler based on your book. You know who won? Patricia Heaton won. Patricia Heaton.
That makes sense.
Yeah. There are a couple of other Italian-American actresses who came through, whose name I can't remember. But as I added it up on my subtext, Patricia Heaton won going away. Do you know her? She's a Rocky River gal.
Yeah, well, her and I follow each other on X. We've gone back and forth before, and she, her and I are both around the same age. She's Catholic, and it just makes sense.
And she lives in Rocky River half the year, and she's a Browns fan. And her dad was Chuck Heaton, the sports editor of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which was your rival Pittsburgh Post-Gazette rival. But you must have had a Chuck Heaton over at the Gazette, right? Someone who ran the sports department.
Oh yeah, and by the way, the Plain Dealer and the Akron Beacon were at these top-notch newspapers. I don't know if people know that. I mean, they just did great work.
In the northern Ohio of my youth, we had the Warren Tribune Chronicle, the Youngstown Vindicator, the Akron Beacon Journal, and the Cleveland Plain Dealer. That's 4 good newspapers in a region that's about a fifth of the state. I don't know if Pittsburgh had that. Did you have a morning and a daily paper in Pittsburgh? A nighttime
we had
paper?
the Pittsburgh Post. Yeah, we had the Pittsburgh Press, which my grandfather worked at for 50 years. We had the Sun Telegraph, and we had the Post Gazette.
It's unfortunate. I learned this week from Vic Mattis that the Washington Post, for which you are now a writer, is down to guess how many print copies subscriptions they have. Print, not electronic, but print.
I have no idea.
90,000. 90,000.
That makes me very sad.
It is. And people don't read newspapers anymore. They don't get them delivered. Maybe the Journal, maybe the New York Times, but not, even the Washington Post is going under. The LA Times went under a long time ago, and I think probably the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Are they still doing a print edition?
They do it 3 days a week.
How big is the Sunday paper?
Not like what we grew up with. Not like what it was even 10 years ago. Not like it was even 5 years ago.
If you can hang around, Selena, I want to talk to you about the verdict today in New York and whether or not you're going to talk to the president about that, because I'll be on special report tonight. I get to talk about it, but I want to hear what your reaction is to it as well, as Donald Trump wins a major legal victory today. And his favorite reporter is talking to me right now, the author of the best-selling book, Butler, Selena Zito, probably President Trump's favorite journalist in the United States. She turned me on to the Derek Van Orden story, and so I tracked down the congressman earlier today, and the interview that I did with him will play at the top of next hour, so do not miss that. Selena Zito, you're still with me. I'm wondering what your reaction was to the decision by the appeals court in New York, 5-0, to throw out the $500,000 fine that includes the interest assessed against the Donald Trump organization and the president.
Well, I've been underground all day, literally. And so I didn't read all the details about it. However, it's just a series of legal penalties and legal proceedings against the president that have continued to unravel in the past few months. And it really speaks to the validity of everything, each one against him, and undermines those validities. But it also just sort of speaks to, he kept talking about this is rigged and it's a witch hunt. And we're finding out that's exactly right. Right? He was mocked by the mainstream and legacy media for saying those things. But as each one of these peel away, it just underscores the personal attack used by our legal, used by his enemies, using our legal system, and each one of them unraveling.
None of it stuck. We still have Juan Merchan, who will be reversed eventually, the decision that Alvin Bragg got. But Fannie Willis, Jack Smith, Letitia James, it's all fallen apart. And I'm wondering if the Democrats will suffer downstream impacts of this. When they cry foul, will anyone believe them anymore? What last word do you think that they've lost credibility?
They've totally lost credibility. That's the last um, chapter in my book, and that's what that's all about. And the problem for Democrats and my profession is how they have just created this sensationalism against the president, and how it has just turned around in their face and smacked them in the face and gone against them. And I just think that there is a reckoning that is happening currently, that the Democrats and my profession still don't sort of understand. But it is, I find it culturally. I just drove 4,000 miles back and forth across the country. It is very real, and this just makes it more real.
That is a great word on which to end the hour. Selena Zito, thank you. Follow her at Zito Selena on X. All things Selena also available if you go to selenazito.com and get her newsletter. Everything she writes will come to you. Go and order the book Butler, still on the bestsellers list where it'll stay all summer. It is an amazing book, Butler by Selena Zito. Congressman Derek Van Orden is a frequent guest here. He represents Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. And I'm normally here to talk with him about policy and politics, but today I want to talk to him about heroism. Congressman, welcome back. Good to see you. I was incredibly grateful to Selena Zito for writing up what you did this Saturday past. Was it just past Saturday or a week past Saturday?
This last Saturday, yes.
Would you tell the audience what you were doing when you were driving down the highway in Wisconsin?
Well, we're in Iowa. I do live in Wisconsin, but we were on the way down to get with family because this last Tuesday is the second anniversary of our oldest daughter dying from cancer, and we were going to go down and meet family, and that day, this last Saturday, have a memorial service for her. So that's the context, and we're driving on Highway 35 south, just south of Osceola, Iowa, and I noticed a semi-trailer pulled off on the side of the road in the northbound lanes. I didn't think anything of it until about a second later I heard a massive boom and looked in my rearview mirror and saw a minivan in the process of disintegrating. I mean, it was just a horrific crash. And my wife, Sarah Jane, asked me, what was that? And I said, somebody just died. I mean, it was shocking, the violence of that accident. So I turned around and drove up the median. There's a grass median. The quarter of a mile or so we traveled in that, a couple seconds. I drove up and I parked about 15 meters or so away from the car because I didn't know if it was going to explode or not. And then ran over. There's a woman in the driver's seat. And then I ran around the car to the passenger, the side that took the brunt of the impact. And there was an 11-year-old in there who's essentially from the bottom of his right knee down to his ankle on the side. All of the flesh was removed. It was a terrible injury. And then on his right forearm, he also had an open fracture with an arterial bleed. So I sprinted back to our truck and I opened up my suitcase because we were visiting, and I got 2 pairs of socks out of my suitcase and then tied them together, 1 pair each, to form a constricting band for both his arm and his leg because there physically wasn't enough material to make tourniquets yet. And that slowed the bleeding, which was great. And then by that time, more people had showed up, and I said, hey, does anybody have a knife? And someone handed me a carpet cutter. So I cut the seat belts, and then we fashioned tourniquets for his arm and his leg. And that stopped the bleeding. And I got to tell you, Hugh, that kid was so brave. He said, is my leg gone? I said, no, it's right here. And don't worry, I'm a combat medic. I was a Navy SEAL. I've seen a lot of injuries like this. You're going to be just fine.
That must have helped. Now, he's 11 years old, right? And he did not lose consciousness. He wasn't in shock.
It was one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in my life. He just, after we talked like that, he said, when's the pain going to go away? I said, the ambulance will be here in just a couple minutes and they'll help you with that. And then he just sat back very calmly. He was just remarkably brave. And I gave the trooper my information because I'm a witness to the accident, and his father got a hold of the trooper, or asked the trooper for my info so he could say thank you. And so we talked on the phone, but then I said, hey, look, we're going to be driving through Des Moines on the way back home to Iowa. So we went and saw him in the hospital. And again, this guy's just sharp as a tack. He immediately recognized me when I walked in the room. And he said, I wouldn't be here without you. And he thanked me. And I said, well, you're welcome, young man. And now you owe me. And this is what you owe me. You need to grow up to be a fine man. And you're one of the bravest people I've ever met in my life. And that's a factual statement.
It's a remarkable story. I'm also, Selena reported, a bunch of other people, after you got things going and had help, a lot of people gathered to help you. And I'm glad you recognize them as fellow Good Samaritans.
I'm trying to get this tourniquet on this guy's leg, and I hear, we got to start doing traffic control. And I turned around. The police weren't there yet. These are just average Midwesterners. So they went out there, they stopped traffic. They wound up blocking off the highway with their vehicles to protect us. A woman showed up. She said, she's a medic. And I'm like, could you please look at the driver? And she took care of the driver. People climbed in the back of the minivan that's just shredded to hold spinal stability. When we had to move this young man who's pretty big, everybody gathered around because we had to push him up this embankment. I mean, it made me so proud to be an American, Hugh. So I've lived all around the world, and it was just amazing. Everybody just came together immediately, and they were flawless professionals. The EMTs were fantastic. The state troopers, the firefighters that showed up there, a game warden came by. And everyone just kind of did their own thing to make sure that we could get everything ready to get these people onto helicopters and get them to the hospital. It was amazing. And
after I read that,
sorry.
my family had gathered last week, and not for a sad and somber occasion like you, remembering your daughter, but we were just together. And I told the story, and my Navy vet son said, the only thing I keep in my car always is the tourniquet. It's the one thing I learned at survival school is always have tourniquets. And I don't know, would he have bled out if you hadn't been there, or would anyone else have been able to do this? Because I don't know how to do what you did.
There's a very high probability that he wouldn't be with us if we hadn't got those tourniquets on him. It's that simple. I've seen wounds like that again and again. And yeah, so
how long
I'll tell you what. Go ahead.
How long did it take you to figure out what you had to do? I know you've been in combat a lot and you've trained for this, but how long did it take you to figure out leg first, arm first, second, tourniquet, stabilize, remove?
Right. I ran around and saw his leg was hanging out of the car. The door was gone. I don't even know where the door is. That's how violent this crash was. I looked at it and immediately said, okay, this is an issue. I asked him if he was okay, and he responded. That means that you have a patent airway. If you can speak, that means you can breathe. So that's always a good thing. Oh. And then you have to address the bleeders immediately. And so the most obvious wound was the one on his lower leg, but you just need to take a second to look at things. And so then checking out his arm, I moved his hand a little bit, and that's where the major bleed was. So
Congressman, tell me one thing. When you're in a situation like that, are you a religious man, by the way?
Yes, I am here.
So you know your daughter's in heaven. Do you feel a special grace when something like that gives you the opportunity to exercise life-saving skills, having suffered such a loss?
Well, I'll tell you, Hugh. I got to speak to the father. He was in the hospital. And I said, sir, and Sarah Jane was there also with me. I said, we lost our daughter 2 years ago. And I'm very glad that you don't have to go through that experience. And it made me look at Sydney's passing in a much different way.
That is from 2.5 hours ago. I got Derek Van Orden popped up, and I wasn't prepared for him a little bit. You could see my earpiece. I hadn't really thought through what I was going to ask him, but you don't need to. The story itself is as riveting as you can possibly imagine. Now, it happens in America every day. good Samaritans are out there every day doing good things. You know, after the storms hit the hill country of Texas, thousands of you stepped up and made contributions. You're good Samaritans. Thank you for that. But would you know what to do? Would you have any idea? Would you have an ability to keep your head about you? Now, the congressman was in the teams and deployed a lot over the course of 20 plus years. I think he was a master chief. And so he's been in a lot of gunfights and he's been in a lot of tough situations. And those are the 20 years during the Long War. He was in the movie Act of Valor, where real SEALs played the roles. They thought it was easier to have SEALs become actors than actors become SEALs. And it was the first movie released after SEAL Team 6 went in and got bin Laden. And so if you recognize Congressman Van Orden, it's because he's the senior chief interrogator in that movie, Act of Valor, starring Rourke Denver and a bunch of other SEALs who are now retired and out of the business. But can you keep your wits about you in a situation like that? Would you know how to do it? I don't think so. I mean, I would like to think I would try and help, but I'd maybe be able to direct traffic. Don't know that I could do tourniquets. Don't even know that I would think about it. So my hat is off to Derek Van Orden and you people in Wisconsin. You are very, very lucky to have a man of valor like that as your congressman in the 3rd Congressional District in Wisconsin. We need more people like that in Congress and fewer people like Adam Schiff. Seth Mandel is an editor and a senior writer at Commentary Magazine. He joins me. Seth, I did not listen to the commentary pods this week because they're doing things like Broadway musicals and things like that. But I would really like to hear your take on what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing when today he announced, okay, we're going forward with the taking of Gaza City, but we're ready to do a deal. What do you interpret this as?
Well, it's the same, I think, plan as it's been all along, which is try to pressure Hamas into a deal, try to pressure Hamas back to the table, but in a way that has the IDF positioned to strike if and when necessary. And if no deal is happening, the IDF is in position rather than a retreating behind the lines and waiting and then coming up with a new game plan if and when a deal doesn't come together. Because you remember about a month ago, Israel got burned by this. They had agreed to a deal. They were ready for it. And Hamas backed away, and they seemed to be somewhat caught off guard just because it seemed all ready to go. So this is just be ready to flip the switch if they need to flip the switch.
The headline is PM, I've ordered immediate talks for release of all hostages and ending the war under conditions acceptable to Israel. Are you saying nothing's changed? That's just repeating the same thing. It might be.
Yeah, for the most part, yes. I mean, Bibi has not come back yet since the last deal, since this Gaza City stuff started. He's not come back yet and said, okay, let's get a partial deal. But he's been open all along to a partial deal. And I wouldn't be surprised if this were a kind of opening gambit to get Hamas to a partial deal. In other words, Hamas keeps walking away from the table. And I think if he shoots for a full deal, he might be able to get something out of them, get them locked in to something. I don't think he's necessarily totally against the idea of a partial deal, but I think he just understands the toll that the war is taking, and letting Hamas string it out is not really an option. So they've got to either find a way to bring it home or to bring the hostages home, but the halfway is just kind of letting things linger, and that's been very tough on the many thousands of reservists who have done several tours and stayed away from home and much more time than they usually do, and it's been a stress on the economy as well. So I think he's just trying to not get caught in a permanent limbo.
So let me follow up on something I raised earlier in the program with Noah Rothman. Earlier today, I listened to the Dan Senor podcast, Call Me Back Insider. I subscribe to that now, and I canceled my subscription to The Atlantic in order to subscribe to Dan's special edition. On the special edition, he took Nadav Eyal and went long. And with Nadav, they were agreeing that the world is killing Israel. They're getting killed by bad press. They're getting murderized by commentary all the world over. And I thought to myself, no, they're not. The left wing in America and the left wing at BBC and Al Jazeera is killing them, but they're not moving the needle against Israel among supporters of Israel. Do you think I'm right about that, Seth Mandel?
I think it depends on what the effect of the criticism is. I mean, if you take, for example, the photos seen around the world weeks ago of the supposedly starving Gazan child who turned out to have a congenital disorder and was suffering from other medical impairments, that those pictures got in front of Trump, and Trump felt like he had to both say something and maybe do something about it. So, one well-placed piece of propaganda can do that. The other thing is that there is some dissent. I don't want to say dissent because there's always dissent. 2 Jews, 3 synagogues. As we like to joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, however you want to say it. But there was. There's an open letter or two every so often from more liberal-leaning rabbis or organizational leaders. There was one very recently, though, that was modern Orthodox. Without getting into all the politics of it and all the divisions, there's a sort of message creep, I think, that is coming. That it's the criticism is creeping up more among those who would usually not throw in their lot with the idea, or not try to throw, not try to push the line that Israel is carrying out some sort of atrocity. So in this case, the starvation, normally it's not that they wouldn't criticize, these rabbis or these communal leaders wouldn't criticize Israel. It's just that they wouldn't necessarily bandwagon on an issue that is being turned into crimes against humanity and things that they know Israel is not actually guilty of.
Now, Seth, the one thing that one country has done, Germany, is refused to sell Israel weapons. The other countries recognizing a Palestinian state, that's a gesture for domestic political consumption for Muslim voters in their country. It's got no real world practical effect. So my question, what exactly do the Israelis who worry about, quote, world opinion, what are they worried about? Rising anti-Semitism, that's on the way anyway.
Right. Well, this is part of the problem, which is I wrote something on this this very topic, which is the world, or at least European leaders, have divorced cause from effect when it comes to diplomacy with Israel. Right? They're not saying we're going to recognize a Palestinian state if Israel doesn't do this. They're just saying we're going to recognize a Palestinian state because we're mad at Israel. So yeah, they've lost a fair amount of leverage. They would probably be worrying Israel more if they had said, look, here's our list of demands, and if they're not met by mid-September, then when we get to the UN General Assembly, we are going to recognize a Palestinian state. Going all the way to doing that, they've played that card now. Germany, it's mostly symbolic in terms of the weapons that they would sell Israel. But again, that's the card they had sitting out there. And so they played it. So yeah, I think that Israel is less worried now than they would be if France and Britain and Germany and maybe Canada too, and of course Malta, don't want to insult Malta, very important state, had said, look, we've got priorities and you better do this or else.
Do you ever get frustrated, though, we have less than a minute, that someone not in the government doesn't say, screw them, we have 20 of our people in there and we're going to keep the pressure on until they're out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've been pretty tough in terms of defending themselves, and and I think that they've really pushed back on friends in some of these states. It's possible they're worried about an EU free trade agreement or something, another domino falling. But I think for the most part, Gideon Saar, who is their foreign minister, has been out there saying, look, there's right and wrong here. And we've got to defend ourselves and protect ourselves, and our state has to survive, and we're going to put that first.
Seth Mandel, always good to talk to you. Follow him on X at Seth Mandel. Listen to the commentary pod. This week it's summertime podcast, and they may or may not fit your diet of podcasting, but when they're live, there's no one better than the commentary gang. I do want to get back to something I mentioned earlier. Abby Phillip is the host of the program on CNN that our fellow Salem colleague Scott Jennings appears on every night, and dominates. No one would know about Abby. No one would know about the program except for that Scott Jennings being on it. Now, Scott's radio show's taken off, and it's doing great because Scott Jennings is funny, smart, experienced, wise, and fast. So my rule when anyone in my orbit gets criticized is to defend them, not to jump on them. That is not obviously Abby's rule because she did the Pivot podcast with left-winger Kara Swisher. Listen to this, cut number 10.
Never bringing people on to say crazy things. Let's be frank about that. That is never the intention, okay? People's decisions to say crazy things are never expected or predictable. However, I mean, and I know that folks really dislike Scott for his views, but I would say that, there are views that you don't like, that you think are unfounded, but that are pretty widely shared. And I think Scott falls into that category. Now, there are definitely times, if you watch the show, that we have conversations where I will say to Scott and others, just stop. Because we're not playing whatever game it is that you want to play in this moment.
Just so we're going to clarify, by the way, we're talking about your Scott, not our Scott. Just
not your, yeah,
Scott.
Which is a point of major confusion between us, Kara, all the time. Yeah. You will say, oh, I did this thing with Scott. And I'm like, you did? I thought you...
Yes, off screen, Scott really Jennings and I are really big. We play pickleball together. We do not. That would be good, though. I would beat him.
But I do think that what I try to say is, if I detect that what you're doing is playing a game of let me say something that I think is going to go viral, let me misrepresent what's being said here to try to create a moment, I will stop that.
Yeah, you did that around Gaza. Happens. Who was that? There was one.
I mean, Scott was involved in that one. I mean, Scott is often involved in those moments when I say, no, we're stopping. And I think that there are guardrails, but I also think it's, this is an imperfect exercise, right? So what you think should be a guardrail, I may not think should be a guardrail. I try to give people a decent amount of leeway to express their points of view, liberal and conservative. And I will tell you that there are times many times, frankly, when liberals cross a line.
Yes.
And again, the same leeway that I give to the conservative guests, I give to the liberal guests to express themselves. But there are times when I have to stop things, to keep things on the rails, to, we don't want to libel people on television. We don't want to, I don't like the personal attacks, which actually do happen more than I would like them to. So, but I think the bottom line is there's an acknowledgement of the imperfection of this, right? This is a conversation.
I don't understand any of that. I do not understand why anyone would say that about a colleague who has put you on the map. I really don't. Now I want to go to Kevin McCarthy, our old friend, former speaker, on with CNN with Dana Bash last night, dropping a truth bomb on Gavin Newsom in California, cut number 11.
California, Republicans vote 39%. They have 17% of the vote. They'll now be down to 6%. Democrats have 83%. You're very upset about Texas. You know what Republicans will have in Texas after they have 56% of the vote? About 72%. Do you know what the Democrats have in Illinois? They have more than 83% of the lines, and the Republicans are for. Yeah, but you haven't done one show on that.
That's not true. We do it all the time.
But Pritzker has. That's what Pritzker already did.
I just showed the map with all.
You showed the map then, but what did we do when Pritzker did about that? Each state has their right, and you know what? The Republicans in Illinois didn't run away from the state. You know what? In California, when they did that, we didn't run away. We competed. Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, and I won the majority by 5 seats. And you know what? I won those 5 seats in California, which people believe it would be very difficult to do. Yeah. So I believe the voters should have the say. That's all this is about. And each state has their own constitution. California has a constitution, and we now have a governor that wants to change the constitution for his own political belief.
I do believe that Newsom is going to have backlash on this because he's in the box, he's in the blue bubble box, and the blue bubble box doesn't let him hear other people saying, what you're doing, amending the state constitution after the constitution was amended to establish an independent commission, is wrong, wrong, wrong. Senator Jim Talent used to represent the great state of Missouri. He was a congressman there, he was a senator there. I'm sure he knows a little bit about redistricting. I'm not sure if you ever had to go through a redistricting, Senator Talent, but tell us if you did and tell us what you think about the redistricting wars.
I actually did a redistricting when I was the Republican leader in the legislature in 1990. It's the most intensely political and partisan exercise that the legislatures ever do. It always has been. I think it always will be. And I judge it on those terms. And the one thing I don't like is when people get holier than thou about it, which naturally the Democrats have been doing, because everybody is absolutely correct. They've gerrymandered Illinois incredibly. They would like to gerrymander California. They're going to try and do it. So it's going on in Texas now. And we'll see what happens. What may happen here in Missouri.
I was about to ask you. There are states other than California and Texas. There's Ohio, which has to do it by law. There is Florida, which can do it if they want to. Missouri and Indiana, which can do it if they want to. New York cannot do it in this cycle, though Kathy Hochul's been, promising retribution. I don't think Democrats want to get into an arms race they can't win, but they are heading that way because it's good for Gavin Newsom's presidential bid. That's my only assessment.
Well, I think it's kind of unwise to be trying to create new districts, and because you always make your existing districts more vulnerable when you do that at a time when your party is losing popularity, if the New York Times is to be believed. Now, I know they're figuring that next year is going to be a Democratic year, and normally it isn't, but normally it would be because they're out of power. But that doesn't always happen. And when midterms go well, for the party that controls the White House, when the president is popular, that's when they go well, especially when he is doing what he said he was going to do on issues where people really wanted him to do it, like immigration, like crime, like some of these gender issues. I'm normally a glasses half empty guy. Dwayne will tell you that. He's the optimist when we do the pod. But I'm not upset about where this cycle is going. And if the Democrats create a bunch of marginal districts, they may lose them.
The 2022 midterms disappointed Republicans. The 2002 midterm greatly disappointed Democrats because they actually saw George Bush pick up House seats. The electoral title chart suggests Democrats should win and get the House back. But they are adopting a significantly radical agenda in the mouths of their most prominent spokespeople that I'm beginning to wonder whether or not the tide chart might be off. Is that in the back of your head?
Well, yeah. I mean, I always think to myself how I would run if I was put in that position in California, let's say. Well, I'd target a lot of Democratic voters who are disaffected over particular issues. I'd go after feminist Democrats on the fact that the Democrats in California are insisting on allowing boys to play in girls' sports. They're incarcerating men in women's prisons, and there's a lot of women, and I mean left of center women, who are very upset about that. I'd go after them. Now, look, nobody knows. It's too early to know what's going to happen, but and then you're right. Also, there's simply more states where Republicans have an opportunity to gerrymander more vigorously than they have in the past. My state is one of them. I mean, the 5th congressional district, they'd have to move 30 to 40,000 votes. The 3 districts around them, Republicans won by about 70% of the vote. Now, it wasn't really contested, but that's Kansas City. You move parts of 15,000 votes into each of those 3 districts from Kansas City. It's doable. I don't know whether the governors want to do it.
You mentioned the Shane Goldmacher article in the New York Times. Shane is a very good reporter, one of the few over at the Times, and he noted that Democrat voter registration is plummeting across the United States, really going low. Do you think they know they're in trouble with America, that they've gone too far to the left?
Well, there's a lot of them who know. I mean, you look at Rui Teixeira. There's a lot of them who are talking about it. And when you're changing registration, I mean, that's not a poll that says you're disaffected with your party. That's you going in there and actively changing the registration. That's pretty definite. So, and it makes perfect sense. In other words, it aligns with the logic of what's happening in the country, which is on a whole series of issues that are very visible to people, and many of which have affected them personally. The Democrats have taken positions that are extremely radical and are fighting the president when Trump is doing what people want done. Now, a lot of people don't like the president's style. They may have doubts about how he's doing it. But his president's numbers are pretty good, and I believe him. I mean, I do. And so the District of Columbia is an example, I mean, the Democrats are screaming about this. We took over the District of Columbia in 1995 when I was in the House. We did a lot more than Trump's doing and turned it around, and the Democrats supported it. So
everyone who uses Union Station supports it. Yeah, everyone who uses Union Station knows what the problem was there, and they are supporting it. But my son was in the subway when shots rang out. People get carjacked who are Congress people. People get assaulted at the Navy Yard, which was a hot neighborhood 5 years ago. It's really kind of collapsed in 5 years. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think in this case, it's not as comprehensively bad government as it was when Marion Barry was running the place, and that's when we had to take it over. But it's very bad government on this whole issue of crime. And I don't go back to Washington as often as I did, but I do go back. And when I have to go from my hotel to the Reagan Institute, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And I do it late at night. I generally get a cab or an Uber, and it's only like 6 blocks. Normally I'd walk, but it's concerning. And you're right about Union Station. And nobody likes violent. Everybody wants violent crime to be suppressed. I mean, so I didn't say
the only thing I worried about in D.C. In 1983, we lived there. We lived off of Connecticut up at California, and I would go out and run in the dark in the morning. I'd run down 17th Avenue to the mall, turn right, come up Rock Creek Parkway. The only thing I worried about were the rats, which were enormous, and I'm sure they're still there. But I would never do that today. Never, ever would I do that today, because in those days,
and you're right about Union Station. I walk.
Yeah. All right, we're out of time. Jim Talent, thank you. Follow him on X at Jim Talent. I want to remind you, I've got a YouTube channel, and if you have missed today's interviews with Selena Zito and Derek Van Orden, if you missed Noah Rothman and Seth Mandel, we'll put them up at YouTube. Harley will take care of that. I know you want to see it. The Derek Van Orden story is simply extraordinary. Off air, one of my guests told me it brought them to tears, as I think most people do when they realize he saved a boy's life on the anniversary of his daughter's death. And that's pretty extraordinary. And my hat is off to Congressman Van Orden. I do want to thank Relief Factor as well. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. They are such great sponsors, and it's such a great product. I got my 10K in today, got it in early this morning, and did it early, and I'm happy that I did, but I'm a little bit behind the curve this year for a variety of reasons, a lot of different things going on, and so I haven't really got the same number of miles in this year that I have for the last 3. So there's a tendency to get more aches and pains if you're not as regular in terms of the number of miles that you do every day. And so doing the 10K is usually a 3 to 5 times a week thing for me. It's only the second time I did it this week. So the relief factor really matters. If you're a gym rat or a jogger or a runner or a swimmer, whatever it is you do, if you do it intermittently, you know that it always catches up with you. And that's why you should take relief factor every day at the same time. I always take it in the first hour on the air so you can see me do it. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or simply go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Find that special starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day, and try it for 3 weeks. You will thank me. For the rest of you out there, I want you to know, especially that Pope Leo, if you're Catholic, has asked that the faithful out there, the billions and billions of Catholics, mark tomorrow as a special day of fasting and prayer for peace in Ukraine and the Middle East. And that's a pretty solid ask by the new Pope. He doesn't ask for much, didn't come out and ask for money. I thought he might because his numbers are high. And I just want to tell you that if you're practicing Catholic, and maybe if you're just a co-religionist and a Christian, you might want to go along with the idea that tomorrow is a special day to pray for Ukraine and the Middle East. I want to do one more thing while I have enough time to get it in, which is play for you one more clip, which is Homeland Security. I don't have enough time. Let's go with Ron DeSantis on Gavin Newsom, cut number 8.
Why is he spending all this time, trying to be fresh with President Trump? Why doesn't he do his job and protect the people? And as much as we somehow poke fun at California, oftentimes because of all the problems that the liberal policies have allowed, that is spilling over into the rest of the country. And Florida is a tragic example with 3 of our fellow citizens who were dead because of his sanctuary policy.
That's tough, but it's true. So you can be tough when it's true. The sanctuary policy did allow an illegal alien to get a commercial driver's license, and 3 people are dead as a result. That is tough, but fair.